What up? Another video, UCL semis. Let's go. So UCL semifinals. They didn't really get to do much of a reaction to the quarterfinals or my predictions from the quarterfinals at all. Just been busy with a couple of things. But just to briefly touch on it, I got 3 out of 4 right in terms of my predictions, just in terms of the outcomes. So I'll take that. Arsenal proved me wrong, proved a lot of people wrong, and I think a lot of the narrative in terms of Madrid being this unstoppable force in the UCL and Arsenal not really having much UCL pedigree really overshadowed maybe the direct analysis looking at the squads head to head and the disparities between these two teams. And Arsenal, with the win against Madrid in very convincing fashion, I think proved a lot of people wrong and has changed the view of Arsenal and especially this Arsenal team in the eyes of many people. So looking at their tie against PSG, I think I think they match up pretty well against PSG. I think they have a really good chance of progressing to the final. That being said, it's not going to be easy. I honestly think this is a 50-50 game. Both these teams will be fully focused on this tie. I mean, obviously, when you're in the UCL semifinals, that is the focus. But both these teams are done in the league. PSG French champions. Arsenal are going to finish second. You look at the form coming into this game for both teams. I mean, both teams dropping points. Arsenal losing against Palace. Drawing with Palace. PSG losing against Nice. I don't really think there's much to take away from that, though. I'd rather just look at the teams in terms of how they match up head to head. I think you look at the back line for Arsenal, including the goalkeeper, compared to PSG. Donnarumma, probably the best keeper left in the tournament. No disrespect to Raya, but I think Donnarumma is just a much safer pair of hands than David Raya. You look at the defense. I think the defenses are pretty comparable. I think you really see the difference in the center back between PSG and Arsenal. I think PSG center backs are okay. I like Pacho. I think he's looked good this season. Marquinhos is always a solid defender, but again, Pacho against Villa in the second half and the second leg looked very uncomfortable. I think Marquinhos as well has an error in him. We've seen it in the past in the UCL compared to Saliba. One of the best center backs in the Premier League in the world. Kylior, who actually surprised a lot of people, I think, with his performance against Real Madrid, really elevated his game. Is looking very solid. I think the fullback duos between these two teams. I think you have Hakimi Nunes, in my opinion, is the best fullback duo in Europe. I mean, Barca might have a say about that, but I think Arsenal come very close with Timber and Luis Skelly. Again, I question marks about Luis Skelly in the first and against Madrid in terms of his defensive ability and in terms of his temper, and I think he showed a level of maturity to be able to perform like that, especially against a team like Real Madrid. And we get to the midfield, and I think this is where Arsenal really can cause problems for PSG. Similar to how Villa caused problems for PSG in the second leg, in terms of the physically imposing midfield. If you can throw the PSG midfielders off their game, just be the physical dominance of the team. For example, yes, PSG were all over Villa in the first leg. I understand that, but the first leg's at Arsenal. At the Emirates, and I really think Arsenal have an opportunity to capitalize here, with the first leg being at home. So, in the Villa game, going back to that, John Neves, Vitinha, Fabian as well. These guys are all technicians. They're not really physically dominant. You can make the argument about Fabian, but really for a 6'4" midfielder, 6'2" midfielder, you're not. I don't really think of him as a brute. Compared to Arsenal, you have the likes of Declan Rice, Marino. I know Partey will be out for the first leg. Even the likes of Odegaard. I think all these guys have an engine on them, and I think they can really throw this PSG midfield off the game by upping the tempo, upping the intensity, and really getting at them and making PSG uncomfortable in the midfield because Vitinha, Neves, these are the guys who really get the ball to the attackers, the star power of PSG, which gets me to the front line. I think, the likes of Dembele, Kvaratskhelia, Doué, Barcola, all these guys have a moment in them. They all have X factor in their game. They're all special players. However, despite, Dembele in terms of his goal scoring prowess this year, I still have question marks in terms of who is a clinical finisher on this team. And I think Dembele has shown you throughout the season he can be, but if we're being honest, in the UCL recently for PSG, hasn't been that. You look at Dembele and Kvaratskheilia's performance against Villa. For me, they were very wasteful. And even at the loss against Nice this past weekend, very wasteful. So against an Arsenal team, or an Arsenal defense rather, that's very defensively solid, you need to be able to take your chances. And yes, these guys can create X factors and moments of brilliance, that no one else can do. But for me, it comes down to whether they dribble past like 2, 3, 4 guys, can they put the ball in the back of the net? That's the real question. And on the other end, Arsenal, bar Saka, you have Gabriel, you have Martinelli, and Trossard. There's not really much going up on there. Now, Saka for me is the key for Arsenal to win this game. If Saka has to deliver for Arsenal to have a chance again into this final. Without Saka, Arsenal have no chance. You saw it against Madrid. Saka was instrumental to everything Arsenal did well offensively. And again, I don't see Martinelli having much success against Hakimi. Trossard, he's someone who can get a scrappy goal, but again, I'm not really wowed by the idea of Trossard up top. I think when Eri can come on, maybe do something, maybe let's see if the stage is too big for him, right? Skelly, a youngster who's risen to the stage of the Champions League, can Eri do the same off the bench. And I think you look at key matchups in this game, like as alluded to Saka. You look at him versus Nuno Mendes. Nuno Mendes, who's been one of the best left backs in Europe this season, locked up Salah against Liverpool. Had a bit of an error against Morgan Rogers in the first leg against Villa, but other than that, looks very solid defensively. And again, we'll see what he can do against Saka. That'll be a key matchup. On the other end of that, you have Dembele versus Lewis Skelly. Lewis Skelly is someone who's very good on the ball, very good going forward. How much freedom will he have taking on the likes of Ousmane Dembele, one of the best 1v1 dribblers in the game? I think that'll be a very interesting matchup, and as I alluded to, the midfield. So, getting to my overall prediction for this tie. I think Arsenal, I think they have a very good chance to win at home. And we saw in the first leg, I think, again, as I mentioned, we saw it done in the first leg when they play in the league stage. You see an Arsenal team that can really throw PSG's midfield off their game. Yes, I understand that was a different PSG team without Dembele, Lee King playing up top, but again, I really think Arsenal, the momentum of the Emirates, I really think they'll thrive off that. I think they'll be relentless against PSG. I look at PSG's defense in terms of Marquinhos and Pacho, and even Donnarumma. As much as I say he's a great keeper and he did produce some brilliant saves against Villa, he still has an error in him. Let's be honest. So I think Arsenal win the first leg. I don't think it'll be by much though. I still think, to be totally honest with you, like Mourinho's got to play in the midfield because Thomas Partey's gonna be out for the first leg due to suspension. I think Mourinho is actually a better striker than Trossard, like, being honest. So, I actually think Mourinho being in the midfield, sure, it'll help them there in terms of winning that battle. But up top, you look at Mourinho this year, he's actually been pretty decent for them, for being honest. So, I think Arsenal will nearly win that 2-1. And then it takes us to the second leg. And I think here, we see Arsenal. I had questions about Arsenal going to the Bernabeu. Could it be a team that could handle the atmosphere of the Bernabeu? Parc des Princes, similar thing. Large crowd, passionate fans, loud, aggressive, like unnerving, unsettling for the opposing team. Can they be a team, that won't class under the atmosphere? They won't class under the pressure of going to a big away ground in Europe. And I think Arsenal will prove that in the second leg. And they're a team that's willing to suffer without the ball, willing to play without the ball. And as I allude to, PSG, who's a clinical finisher on their team, right? Yes, you need moments of brilliance against low blocks like Arsenal that can set up against you. However, do I think Arsenal can go to the Parc des Princes and keep a clean sheet? I think it's very much possible. I think it's very much possible. So I think an upset here, I know many people would favor PSG. I personally think it's 50-50 in my opinion. But to a lot of people, like PSG are the favorite. I think Arsenal have a very strong chance to upset PSG here. And that being said, do I think they'll shut out PSG though in their home? Because PSG at home, again, like I said how Arsenal will thrive off the crowd. PSG is also a team that thrives off the crowd playing at home. But still, I think PSG will win the second leg by only 1 goal, which leads me to my prediction that this tie will be decided by penalties. And I think really when it comes to the penalties, we saw PSG beat Liverpool on penalties. And I think a large part of that, look, Liverpool kind of did it to themselves by missing some shots, but it's Donnarumma. I think you can make the argument that he is the best shootout keeper in world football. You could make the argument. Compared to Raya, with all due respect, with Raya and penalties, you see this guy dive before the penalty taker even finishes the run-up. So I think that'll be the difference. So for me, I have PSG going through narrowly on penalties. However, I would not count Arsenal here. I think they have a very good chance to get to the final. Very good chance. But I'm going to pit PSG just on penalties. All right, so talking about the next tie, Real Madrid. I mean, not Real Madrid. Barcelona versus Inter Milan. First leg at Barcelona. Barcelona coming off a win against Real Madrid in the Copa del Rey final. Winning in that manner, you have a lot of momentum going into this game. The treble is on, 4 points top of La Liga. You have one trophy in the bag, and now you're coming out of Inter team that looks to be in a free fall right now. A team that was also fighting for the treble, that saw their league chances pretty much dissipate over the last 2 weeks. Lost against Bologna in the last minute, knocked out against Milan in the cup, and then a loss to Roma on the weekend. So this Inter Milan team coming into this game with a lot of pressure because being in all three competitions and having a chance to be out of them in the span of 2 weeks. So a lot of pressure on them. Barcelona obviously have pressure, but they have a lot more momentum coming into this game. I think you look at Inter Milan. For me, the biggest difference between the two teams is their goal scoring ability. And yes, Inter are a good defensive team. I know they're more known as a defensive team, but when I look at the two attacks, you're not shutting out Barcelona. It doesn't matter how good defensively you are this season, you're not shutting out Barcelona. Now you can frustrate them. You can limit them to even one goal. We've seen it against the likes of Mallorca, where you're a team that can execute a game plan to perfection in terms of stifling them defensively, frustrating Barcelona. You can. However, I just don't see a way you are not conceding at least one goal to Barcelona this season in any game. And compared to Inter Milan, who I think, bar Lautaro Martinez, there's no one else who can really do anything up top. Now, I know Marcus Thuram can. He's been out. And a lot of the reason why they've lost is because of his injury. And I do rate Thuram a lot. But you look at what's behind that, right? When Thuram goes down, or even if Lautaro goes down, you have Taremi, Arnautovic, Correa. These are not names that should be near a Champions League semifinal, if we're being totally honest. So there's a huge disparity there within the attack, as well as the bench. Because beyond Inter's starting 11, maybe Fertesi off the bench, there's no one else on Inter's bench that you really rely on to maybe have a moment of brilliance. While I think with Barcelona, you have the likes of Fermin Lopez who can come on, really change the game. Or if he's starting Dani Olmo, right? I think these are guys that you can call upon, impact the game. Ferran Torres will be starting this game because Lewandowski is out. But again, that still alludes to the depth Barcelona have over Inter Milan. And like I said, I think Thuram's supposed to be back for this game. But if he's not, big issue for Inter. If he's not back for this game, I don't see how they're scoring. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I think Lautaro and Thuram are a partnership that really thrives off each other. Yes, both these players can produce their own individual moments. However, I think these two really need to thrive off each other in order for them to get to perform at their absolute apex. Defensively, we look at Inter Milan. Again, although they lost these games, I know they got battered against AC Milan. I mean, they had their chances. I think Milan were just really clinical in that game. But again, they lost 1-0 to Bologna at the end. And they lost 1-0 to Roma. And I think still they're not really conceding a lot of goals. I don't look at the defense as too much of an issue. However, what I do see as an issue, I guess defensively if you were, is the matchup between Lamine Yamal and DeMarco. I think if you look at DeMarco defensively this season, trouble. I think he had against Elise, against Sane in the second leg, even when Coman came on, DeMarco looked all over the place. And that easily could have been an avenue for Bayern to be in the semifinal instead of Milan or Inter Milan. So I think the matchup between Yamal and DeMarco, I think is one that Barcelona can exploit heavily. Now, if it's Carlos Augusto, I think it's a better matchup for Inter. Carlos Augusto is, for me, in my opinion, a better defender than DeMarco. I mean, DeMarco, look, he obviously offers more going forward. I mean, this season, he's been all right. But I think Alberto Augusto has to be starting this game for Inter. So, other matchups to note, Rafinha on the other side. I think Dumfries is supposed to be back for this tie. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure he is, which is a huge positive for Inter because Matteo Darmian playing as a wingback at 35 years of age, not good. Does not look good. That is not his role, and he should not be playing there, and he should not be playing at Inter Milan at 35 years old playing as a right wing back. And Rafinha, I guess you can say his Ballon d'Or form has dropped off in the last couple of games. But in the UCL, you've seen him rise to the occasion. You've seen this guy, he's a top goal scorer, top most GA in the Champions League this year. So I think he'll have a big role to play in this tie. I mean, he look in the Copa del Rey final was very disappointing, but here I think in the Champions League, I think we'll see the best of Rafinha again in this tie. So again, I think also one thing to look out for is the midfield duo between Barella, Hakan, and Mkhitaryan versus the likes of Pedri, De Jong, and I don't know if it'll be Dani Olmo or Fermin, whoever is the third midfielder there for Barcelona. I think that'll be a very interesting matchup to look at. So my prediction for this tie: first leg in Barcelona. Again, I think Inter will come with a game plan to, you know, they'll be pressed up high on the pitch. Inter will try to play on the counter. I don't know how hot that'll be pretty difficult without Thuram because besides Thuram, I look at Inter's team. They don't have much pace up top. Like, sure, Lautaro is not a slow player, but he's not a player who's gonna burst by you with pace. So I think Inter's game plan to try to play on the counter. I don't know how well that'll work without Thuram. So, but besides that, I think this game will end 2-1 Barcelona, and I think the second leg in the San Siro will be 1-1. I think this game is a lot tighter maybe than some people predicted it to be because if you look at the form of the two teams, Inter on the decline, Barca still maintaining a very high level. But I think Inter are a team they'll just always make it frustrating for anybody. I don't see anyone just blowing out Inter, to be totally honest with you. So for me, to no surprise that maybe to many people, my prediction for the final will be Barca, um, PSG. However, as I alluded to in my Arsenal PSG prediction, I think it easily could be Arsenal Barcelona. Now, if there's a team to count out, I guess for me it's Inter. I just don't see how this current state of Inter Milan or this current Inter Milan team in the form they're in against this Barcelona team. I don't see how they can find their way through. But crazier things have happened. So you can call it being disrespectful to Inter, but I just don't see how they're beating Barcelona. So those are my predictions. Just want to get a quick video out because I just been busy lately. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.